There is one way, though, that teaching too much on the webinar will lose you sales, and that's if you overwhelm somebody. So be cautious of how much you are showing and what you're revealing for free, because it's not a service to help somebody feel more anxious around the topic by the time the webinar is over. It's a hindrance.
Yeah, sounds great. All right. Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate you. And this has been great wisdom. So thank you so much. Yeah, my first question, well, it's a two-part thing. Like, how do I grow my audience beyond my small social media following, first of all? And then second, how many webinars can I run before the launch of a program that doesn't feel like I'm overselling or whatever? Any thoughts on either of those?
Yeah, great questions, Max. So the first question is, I always look at who has the audience I want to get in front of. And then I don't have to sell that audience. I just have to sell that person, the gatekeeper to that audience. And so I'm obsessive. I do so less these days because I don't have to anymore. But at the beginning, it was, let me get in front of this person who has 50 people, because I feel like this person has 50 people that are perfectly suited for what I offer. And this person doesn't compete with me. This person is complementary to me, and they share a lot of the same values. So I'm going to do whatever I can ethically, morally, and comfortably to try to help that person see how working with me is better for them and their audience than not working with me. And you got to start small. So if we pick up 50 here, we pick up 20 here, we pick up 30 there. It doesn't take long until you start to create momentum. It also doesn't take long before you have proof. If everywhere you go, when you partner with somebody, better things happen for them, pretty soon you're the worst kept secret. People will start contacting you and reaching out to you and talking to you. That's one thing you do. The other thing is you still have to do your own stuff. You got to make your own sausage. You should still look at ways of growing your own social media following. It's unlikely at this point, since you said it was small, that you've exhausted the potential of it. That will become an issue later. I've had that issue where it's like diminishing returns. But it's like, how do we just consistently improve portions of this right now? Where can we go? How can we even be more laser focused? How can we create even more content? How can we double the amount of content with the same amount of effort? That kind of thinking. And then you will be amazed at how quickly your audience can grow, even though you're not necessarily working harder. You're just being more strategic. So that's the first part. The second part is a question of saturation, right? I think it's better to err on the side of too much as opposed to too little. Caveat to that, as long as it's useful. If you have sincerity and value, if you lead with that first, you can never oversell. So lead with sincerity and value, and no reasonable person will ever have a problem with you leading with sincerity and value. Their desire to be helped will outclip your ability to help them. Now, if you're concerned about it, talk about it. Tell them, say, listen, I'm trying this thing out. I do have a concern. And the concern is I may be overwhelming you right now. I may be offering this up to you too much. I'm going to try it out anyway. I'm going to see what happens. And then if too much, I'm going to make an adjustment. But here's where it's coming from. It's coming from, and then you explain your position, right? Because I have so much to tell you. There's so many different things that I want to show you, and I'm not sure which ones I should leave out. And I'm afraid if I leave this one out, it might be the one you need. So as long as you make the frame, the context, if you will, understandable, that will go a long way.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hey, thanks, Jason. That was amazing. I just have two really quick questions or clarifications. Would you ever mix the affirming truth close with the two choices close, or keep them separate?
It's a tough one, right? I always trust my intuition until I know better. So if you feel like mixing them makes sense, do it. Then, so we attempt, we observe, and then we adjust. That's the formula I always use. So let me attempt it, let me observe what happens, and then let me make an adjustment. So if it's calling out to you to try it, do it. Generally speaking, you don't mix the two because you don't need to. Usually one is good enough in these situations because it's simply just a transition from, hey, I just taught you for the last 45 to 60 minutes and now I'm going to make an offer for the next who knows how long. But it's worth experimenting. As long as you're sincere and you have that good rapport with the audience, they are going to be very forgiving of the minor little things. And so I would just try out what calls to you first and then make adjustments.
Okay, beautiful. And my second question is, in the people are willing to spend money more than time, I am just changing my avatar to moms of teenage daughters with mental health issues. And so it's pretty niched, and time is a factor because you've only got them at home for a certain amount of years where you have influence and impact. But I also have a belief that people are not willing to spend money on this. And I'm just wondering, if I spell out that you guys don't actually have much time with these girls before they leave home, is it manipulative? Is it too much to really spell it out?
It's a good question, right? So my view on manipulation is a rather agnostic view. Like if you actually take what the definition of manipulation is you change something from its form currently to a different form. Is that unethical? Well, it depends what you're changing and how you're changing it, which gets more complicated. So to me, the word manipulation doesn't have the same emotional impact that it probably does for most people, which is a lesson in of itself. Is the language we use, we should be careful of if it's emotionally charged. Sometimes that can be manipulative. We manipulate ourselves and we don't even realize it. Two ways you can deal with this is one of it is you can just flat out bring it up. One of the ways you could handle this is saying, my concern, and it's a concern other people told me, is that in your situation, you supposedly don't have the resources financially to make this investment. And so the advice I've been given, and actually what I've been thinking myself, was make it really cheap. So that way I can make it affordable to the most amount of people possible. Here's the problem with that though. If I were to make it cheap, then I couldn't do X. Then I couldn't do Y, then I couldn't do Z. So I'm at a real crossroads here. I'm at a real dilemma. Do I make it cheap and reach the masses, or do I create the exact program I think would be the most valuable, and then know that I'm probably limited by those who are in a position financially and emotionally and psychologically to make such a commitment? It's that whole 80-20 rule. 20% of your audience is going to get 80% of the results. And it's not always the case. It's correlative, not causal. But there's a high degree of correlation between the people that are willing to invest at the higher levels and the people that get the best results. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close to it. And so if we lay just a demographic overlay on your audience, there's going to be an economic distribution there where 10% of your audience is going to make probably over $100,000 a year or more. It's just the probability of economics in that situation. There may be 1% of the population in the United States are millionaires. That's a statistic. It's something like that. Well, what does 1% mean? It means that statistically, there's a lot of millionaires out there. As a percentage, not that many. As a whole total number, a lot. And so if we got to start there, we start there. Doesn't mean we end there, right? Because by the way, the rich can pay for the poor. And it's one of the things I like so much. Once you hit that first early adopter market, where money is different for them, where they can spend 10 times as much, but as a percentage of their income, it's inconsequential. They can then help you fund the development to make your offer more democratic in the future. And they're okay with it because they would rather get the result today than wait 2 years and get the result. And then you can slowly over time introduce other on-ramps for other people in other financial positions. But I certainly absolutely would go directly into, you have a ticking clock on your head. Your time is running out and something needs to be done. I would go for that because internally, many of your audience are even more brutal the other way. So they are saying things to themselves that are limiting and overwhelming them. And we have to cut through that. And then that's my personal opinion on the matter is I got to bring in the big guns because there's a lot at stake here. And if I don't say the right things and I don't meet them where they're at, I don't help them. And of course, you got to be comfortable with it at the end of the day. And you got to reconcile it. But I would rather push a little too hard and get them than not push hard enough and lose them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does feel like the big guns are necessary. It's just really uncomfortable, but I'll just do it and practice.
So don't just do it. Set aside an hour and sit down and write down every conflicting and contradictive belief you have on that. Here's where it feels right to me, but here's where it feels wrong to me. Put it all out on paper and don't censor yourself. Lay it all on the line. And then see if you can reconcile some of these contradictive beliefs. Because like a lot of people have this contradictive belief on making money, where it's like, I want to make a lot of money. My mom told me 50 years ago that I'm greedy if I make a lot of money. So I'm moving forward, but I'm moving backwards at the same time. This internal conflict will hold you down so much. It will stress you out so much. See if you can reconcile these internal conflicts. Just putting them out on paper can help a lot. So put them out on paper, and then you might find the best way to reconcile it is to have that frank conversation with your audience. This is why I do it all the time, right? Here's the issues I have with this, but here's why I'm going to do it anyway. So sometimes just putting it out there is useful.
Yeah, I think like that makes sense. Even thinking about it, like I want to tell the truth, but that's in contradiction to wanting to be liked. And even just thinking about it and saying it, I can reconcile it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, most welcome. By the way, for those of you who have struggled where you say, I want to tell the truth and who have kids like I do, I told them there was Santa Claus. I lied to them. So telling the truth is not the only objective here necessarily. If there are multiple truths you can tell somebody and one truth will have more value to them today than another truth, then you tell that truth. So Santa is the truth for people that want to have creative imaginations and want to have exciting things to look forward to. That's its truth. So realize the truth isn't necessarily black and white.
Hey, thank you so much. Jason, my question is, how do I balance the ratio of actual course content on the webinar? Because my insecurity I have is that they're going to buy the course and be like, he just said that for free.
Yeah, it's a great question. I find it's almost impossible to give away too much for free. Think about it from this perspective. One of the easiest solves that you can do there is you can give away everything for free, but if you have a resource guide that's a checklist or a standard operating procedure or something of an accountability that they have to check in, even accountability with themselves, right? We can just change the modality for the deliverable from education alone or information. The reality is information is not that valuable in and of itself. So if all you have to offer is something that you could give away the totality of it in 45 to 60 minutes, I'm saying we better beef that offer up. We better make it stronger. But I don't think that's the case here because I found it's rarely the case. Instead, what we want to do is maybe we put structure to it. So in 60 minutes, you can teach them everything high level, but you can't put structure to it where they make a decision matrix of first I do this, but then if I do this, then what do I do? If I do this, then what do I do? So I look for ways in which we can help them get further along quicker with the information. So we can give the information away up front, and then we could fulfill other things that once they understand that information will be useful to them. But until they understand that information, it will not be useful to them. But there's never been a situation where I've went out there and I've tried to teach them everything in my course that has made them not want to buy my course in terms of giving away too much. There is one way though that teaching too much on the webinar will lose you sales, and that's if you overwhelm somebody. So be cautious of how much you are showing and what you're revealing for free, because it's not a service to help somebody feel more anxious around the topic by the time the webinar is over. It's a hindrance. So the right amount of information at the right time, it's like a dosage of prescription medication. More isn't necessarily better.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Hey, so I do shamanic work, so it's a little bit different. I do sound healing ceremonies. And so I did one webinar where I was able to, I'm doing webinars like full moon ceremonies where I'm doing more like an activation and singing mantras, etc., and then inviting them for a connection call afterwards. And so my question is, how do I, because this is very much like teach a thing and then have, and so it's a little bit different. So yeah, for the energetic work that I do, what would you suggest to create that sense of urgency and impact? Because it worked. I got one person and I sold for the first time, so it's good. Excellent. But how can I weave it a little bit more towards what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michelle. So when you said it worked, how many of these webinars have you done so far?
So I did one officially. I got 70 signups. I had 20 people show up on the call, 10 people on video, and one person convert to my 3-month coaching program.
Incredible, right? So do it again. I love these types of webinars, Michelle. They are actually more effective webinars than traditional information-based webinars. In fact, every single webinar I've done that's been a 10 out of 10 has had a dramatic demonstration in it. And what I'm hearing from you is dramatic demonstration. So like in software, it was really easy where we just say, here's how we solve this problem, and click, 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 boom, and it's done. Do you want this? Yes. Well, I had a client I worked with many years ago that was a hypnotist. And we would just hypnotize them for 45 minutes. And then we would sell them afterwards. And they would get this experience of deep relaxation, and they would understand the value of it, not because we taught them anything, but we transformed them. Just do it again. I'm assuming there are a couple things that you noticed could have been improved from the last webinar. Is that true?
I feel, can I say something that's different a little bit? It has not to do with what could be improved from the webinar, but my pitch was more of a, hey, let's have a connection call because I want to build community, which is true. And then the one person who did the connection call, I knew that we went into, like, it was just like, yes, we're meant to work together. So my curiosity is how do I not take them out of like a trance state, which I don't want to pitch in that, because I actually don't feel in integrity with that. It's not manipulation. It's just somebody's field is so open. I don't want to set like, totally. Right. So how?
I totally understand that. Right. You're putting them in a very vulnerable state.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you want to honor that, and you want to keep that safe. Yeah. So in this particular instance, I would just say that. I would say, I have this thing over here that if you're the right fit, I'd love for you to do it. However, because I've just put you in this very vulnerable state, I feel very uncomfortable making an offer to you on this. And so here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to send you this link. And then tomorrow You can look it over, review it. And then if you decide it's for you, we can go from there. Try that out, something like that. And I just made that up off the top of my head. So I don't even know if it's the best thing or the right thing. It's a thing to consider. We don't have to do it the same way that is traditionally done. I think that's a lesson for all of us. My consulting client I was talking with the other week, I kept telling him that because he kept resisting these issues. He's like, well, all these people in the marketplace are doing it this way, and all these people are doing it this way, and they spend this much money on ads before they determine it is or it isn't. And I said, be very cautious of making your decision based on how other people do things, because other people aren't living your life. So it's your rules, it's your planet. You can make it up however you want to. You will probably notice that more people will want to do business with you sooner if you approach it correctly, because they will appreciate your sentiment and they won't think it's a gimmick. They'll actually believe in the integrity of it. And that will make them more excited to try to do business with you. If it's irreconcilable, which it may be after you've tried it enough times, then you may have to go to different methods of selling it that wouldn't include a webinar. But I wouldn't give up on it soon.
What does that mean when you just said if it's in record? What does that mean?
I would figure out other ways to sell them without putting them in a state of vulnerability first, like that, like an intense, deep opening. If it wasn't reconciled, I would have to say, okay, this is off limits. How do I still achieve my objective? I know it's possible, right? But I believe that it is reconcilable. And I would certainly want to give it enough attempts through enough experimentation to try it out. Here's a question for you. How would you know you had the best customer ever, the best client for your work? What would need to happen for you to realize that?
I can feel it when I'm working with, I can feel the soul of the person, and I can feel their multidimensional self. And I know that we are a match and that I can bring them forward on their path spiritually.
So I would work a webinar, and then if you felt that, you would say, listen, I'm going to make an invitation to those of you that I feel what you just told me, right? And it can be low key. You can give them a link. You say, I've sent you a link just for you, right? Take it out, take a look at it when it's appropriate to you, and then get back to me. And then you can have the follow-ups, you could put in the details and everything else. What will most likely happen if you do that, just to warn you ahead of time, is everybody who doesn't get that link will all of a sudden want that link. And they will start to convince you that maybe you should sell them as well. And then you'll have a new problem to deal with. But again, you can channel through with what you're saying here and make your connections that way. And they don't have to be hard sells. They can be very soft sells in this particular instance. But what's going to be exciting for me is to hear the conclusions of these experiments. And through this exploration, I think you're going to find exactly what's going to work well for you, which is the best thing.
Okay, thanks. I'll just play, I guess. Yeah, thank you.
Just play. Yeah, just play.